Now, you might notice this checkbox up here, where it's checked next to Show Set. Well, because this is checked, what you are seeing displayed within your Properties panel are only the CSS rules that we have applied, or set, shall we say, to this particular div. If I uncheck it, then we now see revealed all the other options that we can change. And there are quite a considerable amount of options that we haven't used yet. So that Show Set option means that you don't have to work your way through all these particular rules and attributes that you don't want to use, and all you do want to see for convenience are those particular rules that you have set. But as I say, if you want to start adding some rules, then by having Show Set unchecked here means you can access all these other options. And no doubt you'll notice just underneath Properties here, you'll see these buttons. The first one relates to the layout, and all the other buttons to the right are specific to a particular function or a particular part of your CSS designing. I'm going to leave it on layout for the moment, and you'll see my first choice here is width, and this pertains to the width of our div. It's set to auto at the moment, but if I want to be specific about this, maybe I want to change this so it only displays at 75% of our browser width. Then by clicking here, where it says auto, you'll now see all these options. Well, I'm going to choose %, and then within here, I'll click once more, and I'll type in 75, meaning we are now set at 75%. And as soon as I deselect to confirm this, we now see within our document that our div has moved from 100% in the width down to 75%. Let's try something else. I'm going to leave all the other options there, just below width, but I'll move down to these even more visual functions. Down here where it says margin, if I want to adjust the margin for this div, then it's a very simple case of changing one of these attributes here, top or bottom, left or right. If you click in the middle, by the way, then that ties all these dimensions together to whatever number you enter into one of them. I'll set the left margin by clicking here, and I'll set it to 15 pixels. And once I've done that and click away, well, we'll now see with our div there is a 15 pixel margin at the left hand side. And if I come up here and preview this by clicking on our Live button, well, we now see that text within our div has been moved over to the right, so that 15 pixel margin takes effect. I'll deactivate Live now. Okay, so that's what we can do with this Layout button. If I move over to our Text button, just to the right here, then you'll see all these textual options, and there are quite a bewildering amount there. And when I say bewildering, perhaps I should say comprehensive. Although I'm sure you're not going to use all these every single time, but they are there should you need them. Now, even though I've got the text tab selected, I can scroll right down here and move down to this category, headed by background image. You'll notice it's set to gradient at the moment, but the gradient is set by that picker just to the right, and because that's got a strike through, then that simply means there isn't really a gradient taking place. But if I want to change this, of course, all I need to do is click on here and choose a suitable colour. Maybe green, and then once you have chosen that, by the way, you'll see the gradient path at the left hand side, so it will start at green at the top and the gradient will smoothly change into red. I'll click away to accept this, and then I'll come over to my Live button, and there you see that gradient now being implemented on our background. Green at the top and then smoothly moving into red as it gets to the bottom. Now, I don't actually like that, I'm just showing you what you can do. I'll deselect our Live button, and simply because that gradient is being applied to our div, then if I extend the height of our div, then that gradient from green to red is going to be larger. If I place my cursor after the word here, and then hit the enter button to increase the div height, and then come back over to our Live button once more, well, there you can see that we start at green at the top and move down into red as we get to the bottom, and now covering a larger area. I still don't like it though, but it might be just what you're looking for. Anyway, I'll deselect the Live view, and I'll come back over to gradient within the background image area here. I'll click on the pick once more, and perhaps I'll change it from green maybe to a more neutral white. And then once I preview by clicking on our Live button, well, it doesn't look too bad now. I'm still not convinced though, but as I say, it might be just what you want for your site. Just don't ask me to look at it. Anyway, let me deselect Live once more. And really, that's what this Properties panel can do for you here within CSS Designer. You can flick between all these separate buttons to access and facilitate different parts of your CSS design. For example, if I click on my third button here, we now get to set our borders. Or by clicking on this button, as we've just done, we get taken to the background area within this Properties tab. And that should indicate what this Properties panel actually does. these buttons don't open up distinct or separate areas. All they do is they either scroll us up or down within this properties view and take us to that access point whereby that particular button relates to. And coming back to my checkbox here, this Show Set checkbox, if I now check it, then you'll notice just underneath our properties here that only the 3 relevant buttons that we are using are now on display. We don't see all those buttons because some of those buttons we aren't using, and therefore populated within this properties panel are only those attributes that we are connecting at the moment to our CSS. It does make this a lot easier to view. And when we are viewing like this, then if you want to change a particular attribute, well, you can do easily enough. For example, with our width that we set to 75% a few moments ago, well, if I click on this button here, this would actually remove this rule. If I don't want to remove it, but I want to disable it, just to see what it's like without it, but without removing it, then the button just to the left, this one here, well, select that, and as you can see, that now disables that rule, or at least that part of our CSS file. You'll now notice my div, despite looking like it's set to 75%, well, that rule's been disabled, and it now goes back to the default of 100%. I'll click on here once more to re-enable it, and then to completely remove it, well, I will click on here, this delete button, and then if I want to change my text from that blue, I'll come down here, click on here once more, and I'll take this to a more conventional black. And simply because I don't like that background image being a gradient, well, I'm going to click on here to remove that completely. And therefore, lastly, if I come over to my Live button, we now see our text does look a little bit more conventional, and certainly easier to read now it's black and not obscured with that gradient background image. Okay, now I'll just deselect Live. And now, if you're curious of what your CSS file looks like with these particular rules written into it, which we've not had to do by hand coding, we've simply done it by clicking on buttons and changing attributes like a percent or a pixel size, well, by clicking on the related file here, this CSS file, well, I now automatically move to the split view, and you'll see within the CSS file, everything that we've done visually has now been created for us, meaning we haven't had to write any of this CSS code ourselves. And for that alone, I heartily love this CSS designer. Right, we're going to finish here then for this lesson, so I'll see you in the next one.